A vital element in keeping the peace is our military establishment. Our arms must be mighty, ready for instant action, so that no potential aggressor may be tempted to risk his own destruction. Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
The USAID and the State Department invested $400 million in a project that was supposed to build 1,200 miles of roads across the country. Cut to 3 years later, they've built 100 miles of road, and they spent more than $200 million, more than half of the money.
Oh, wow.
It's not just roads. You can see this in schools. You know, there are schools that were built and then shut down within a year. Schools that never had a single student in them, despite some reporting up the chain that they did. And hospitals that were either built in places where they didn't need a hospital or built and they were so expensive to operate and they required all this machinery and they just couldn't be sustained. And so many of those projects have collapsed. But if you look at the reports that the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction have put out, that looks at $8 billion worth of reconstruction money that the U.S. spent since 2008, like $7.8 billion exactly, to see what the state of that was. And they found that only $1.2 billion worth of that money, those projects were still being done the way they were supposed to. The rest of it, who really knows?
This is one of the worst foreign policy decisions in American history. Much worse than Saigon, because after we left Saigon, there weren't Vietnamese terrorists who were planning on attacking us here at home. That we leave behind exactly what we went in to solve 20 years ago, and I fear for the future in continuing the war on terror. You know, just because we decide to quit fighting doesn't mean the terrorists go away.
So I wouldn't necessarily equate the departure of our forces in July, August, or by early September with some kind of immediate deterioration in the situation.
2,500, which was the last notion that we would keep there, but even a true presence in the 10 to 15,000 range is not huge given the overall size of our military capability. And as an insurance policy against a terrorist attack, it was important.
Well, Mr. President, some Vietnamese veterans see echoes of their experience in this withdrawal in Afghanistan. Do you see any parallels between this withdrawal and what happened in Vietnam, with some people feeling?
None whatsoever. Zero. What you had entire brigades breaking through the gates of our embassy. 6, if I'm not mistaken. The Taliban is not the North Vietnamese army. They're not remotely comparable in terms of capability. There's going to be no circumstance where you see people being lifted off the roof of an embassy of the United States from Afghanistan. It is not at all comparable. The assumption was that more than 300,000 Afghan national security forces that we had trained over the past 2 decades and equipped would be a strong adversary in their civil wars with the Taliban. That assumption that the Afghan government would be able to hold on for a period of time beyond military drawdown turned out not to be accurate. Let me be clear. Leaving August the 31st is not due to an arbitrary deadline. It was designed to save American lives. My predecessor, the former president, signed an agreement with the Taliban to remove U.S. troops by May the 1st, just months after I was inaugurated. It included no requirement that Taliban work out a cooperative governing arrangement with the Afghan government.